From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. 49ers vs. Saints game preview show. We get to set the table for the San Francisco 49ers vs. Saints. That's right. We've been going through content all week, setting up offensive key matchups, defensive key matchups, looking at the numbers with the tail of the tape. We've went into the coach approach and talked about a little bit of the game plan and some things there. Even went on with Wayne Breezy, and we talked about the game plan even deeper over there. And now it's the culmination of all that work, all the film study, as we get into completely setting up this 49ers versus Saints matchup. Now we know where all the injuries are at. We have a pretty good idea of who's going to play. We know how these coaching staffs want to operate. We've got a little bit of film. We'd like to have 2 or 3 games of film to give a really good idea of how the coach is going to, attack different defenses, use his personnel, and both offensively and defensively. But even just having a simple, 48 minutes or 60 minutes of football in this case is plenty to be able to look at what they're doing and get a general idea of how they plan to attack your particular offense or your particular defense. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to lay it all out in this episode. This is the episode to watch if you want to get prepared for 49ers versus Saints. So I'm really excited about it. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating if you feel that I deserve it. And of course, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you're going to bet with FanDuel, you got to do it. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to be giving some bets that I think are good wins for the 49ers. I'm going to be doing that towards the end of the show when I give my game predictions. So, FanDuel provides a lot of cool props. There's a lot of things to go over. You can look at if you want to download the app. It's available. FanDuel, the title sponsor of 49ers Cutback. So let's get into this. And the key thing to look at first has got to be injuries. So we can know who is going to be on the field. For the 49ers, of course, everyone kind of saw this coming after Kyle Shanahan's comments earlier in the week that Brock Purdy was a long shot, but now Brock Purdy is officially out for the game versus Saints, which means Mac Jones will be making his first start for the 49ers organization. Now, he's had starts in his career, whether that was with New England or with Jacksonville. He's had opportunities to play in this league. So he's seen a lot of defenses. He's seen teams and the way they want to attack. Mac Jones is prepared for this moment. I think he has a pretty good understanding of this offense. And so at least the 49ers have a backup they can feel comfortable that he can step in and lead this team in a good manner. I don't think he can do it as good as Brock, but he can do a good enough job to make some things happen. Now, the updates on Jauan Jennings and Trent Williams are as this. Jauan Jennings, he practiced on Friday. It appears Jauan Jennings is going to play. I think that I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion, but I definitely would put this thing as a pretty high percentage, maybe 80-85% that Jauan Jennings is playing in this game. Great news for the 49ers. It really sounded like Kyle Shanahan had Kendrick Bourne playing in this game as well, which means you've got 2 legitimate third down threats and some guys that Mac Jones, can really rely on, especially Kendrick Bourne. They have a little bit of a chemistry there. So Jauan Jennings being out there means your wide receiver room is going to be pretty veteran-laden when you look at who's up there on the active roster. Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall. I know second year, but Ricky's playing like he's been around for a while. And then you have Kendrick Bourne. You have Marquez Valdez-Scantling. You have these guys that can go out there and generate. And Valdez-Scantling, very familiar with the Saints organization. He was just there at the end of last season. So you've got some possibilities there for these guys to make some plays. Jauan being there is huge. And then Trent Williams. Kyle Shanahan, there was a big report on Friday that Trent Williams wasn't going to practice, according to 95.7 The Game. However, Kyle Shanahan in his presser said he did practice. It was half-speed practice, and he went through it. And this is something I talked about during the week, that as Trent kind of practiced in that practice, I thought that there was a chance he'd play. We've seen him do this before when he had ankle injuries. He really takes care of it throughout the week. Friday, he goes out there and he tests it, see what he can do, and then he has an opportunity to play. I'm less sure about him playing because it is a leg injury than I am about Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings, it's all about pain management. For Trent Williams, it's about mobility and movement, and there's a flight that takes place with him going to New Orleans. So I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion with Trent Williams. I put, that probably at like 60-40 that he plays, but I think it's looking more positive for Trent Williams, which would be a huge part of the 49ers game plan. Now, for the Saints, they have several players out. Julian Blackmon, he's out. Their safety position started with Tyrann Mathieu retiring. They brought in Julian Blackmon. Now he's hurt. It looks like he's going to be out for the entire season. That's really going to hurt. But the good news is their backup safety, Jordan Howden, did return to practice. He's going to be good to go for them. So it'll be Howden out there and maybe a little bit of Jonas Sanker. We'll see what we see from that safety room. Chase Young won't be playing against his old team in the 49ers. He's still out with a calf injury, so no Chase Young. Trevor Penning, the starting guard, he's going to be out as well. He's been out for a while. They were hoping he was maybe going to be able to work his way in the last couple weeks. Hasn't panned out, so they're going to have Dylan Radins will be starting in his spot at the offensive guard position. And then Talise Fuaga, good news for the Saints. Fuaga left the game last week. Did not practice early in the week, but as this week went on, he started to get work. He's listed as questionable, and I would say he's got an opportunity to play. Very much put him in the same category as Trent Williams, where he's got a shot. We'll see what happens with Fuaga and see if he ends up getting out there. But that kind of sets the tone for the injuries. The good news is that it's not overwhelming, but, I mean, for the 49ers, you're missing your number one guy at quarterback, and you've got to make up for that. So we know that the Saints didn't plan on having Spencer Rattler as their quarterback, and they wanted to have Derek Carr, so they're in a similar situation. So it's kind of even when it comes to, them playing with a backup quarterback. Now, head coaches, of course, Kyle Shanahan and Kellen Moore, and they are both the play callers as well. So Kellen Moore, of course, offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers, and then offensive coordinator last year for the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, which catapults him to get this job. So Kellen Moore will be calling the offense. He knows what he's doing. He's got the ability to call a good game. So definitely a reliable play caller. When you look at the coaches, the defensive coordinators, Robert Saleh and Brandon Staley, a familiar face to 49er fans. And that's going to be a big part of this football game. Is not only does Brandon Staley have an insight into the 49ers building, insight into what the 49ers like to do on offense. I'm sure he watched a lot. He heard a lot of Kyle in meetings. So he has an understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of Kyle Shanahan's play calling, the offensive system in general, the players that were there before. So he does have insight into that. Not to mention, he used to coach for Los Angeles Rams, and the 49ers and Rams meet up every 2 times every single year. And Brandon Staley's defense was a big part of that. Now, Brandon Staley, he has his unique ways to go about defense. First off, he learned under Vic Fangio, and so he comes in with a quarters mentality, that mentality of defense, a 3-4 style defense, which is different than the 49ers, who run in a base 4-3. They do run quarter principles at times, probably more of an eclectic coverage than just a quarters look. They run a lot of single high as well with either a cover 1 or a cover 3, which is the most predominant in San Francisco. And so you do have some differences between the two. Now you've got Robert Saleh and Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley, the architect of the Legion of Boom defense in Seattle. And last year you had Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley. So it's an interesting matchup. I think Kyle Shanahan is very comfortable with who Brandon Staley is and what he likes to do. 5-6 defensive linemen at the line of scrimmage, put pressure on your front side, your line to win at the point of attack, and 1 or 2 linebackers, depending on how many defensive linemen you have. And he likes to keep that 2 high safety shell. He feels comfortable with that. He was one of the first ones to kind of introduce, that 5-2, 5-1, 6-1, 6-2 looks into the NFL more predominantly. I mean, it had been around for years, right? Defenses had ran this, but modern football, he really started ushering it in kind of in that 2020 season And so that's what I expect. We'll see a lot from Brandon Staley. He ran it last week against the Arizona Cardinals, and I expect him to kind of stick with that. The special teams coordinator is Brant Boyer. We'll see what happens. We got a brand new kicker in San Francisco at Eddie Pinheiro. Pinheiro takes over for Jake Moody. Jake Moody lands on the Chicago Bears practice squad. But Eddie Pinheiro has been one of the most accurate kickers in the NFL throughout his 9 NFL seasons, including the fact that he has an 88% success rate when it comes to field goals. That's very, very good. And he's kicked in New Orleans before, spent a few seasons with the Carolina Panthers. So he will be comfortable kicking in the Superdome. So that's good news for the 49ers. And hopefully he's better when it comes to where the kickoffs land as well. That was another Jake Moody problem. So hopefully some of the special teams issues will be ironed out as the 49ers try to turn the page again on what has been just a tumultuous special teams unit, spanning back for 2 other coordinators. Richie Hightower, that didn't really work out. It just has kind of been just a bad situation year after year between the coordinators, and Brant Boyer's trying to turn this thing around. Phil Galanio is the special teams coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. He was the assistant special teams coordinator last year, and Kellen Moore elevated him to be the special teams coordinator. And last week, the New Orleans Saints had really good special teams, good returns. They were successful for the most part, got a blocked field goal as well. So that is a place that they can kind of compete, and the 49ers are going to have to meet that expectation and make sure that their special teams plays well. But let's get into the offensive key matchups for this game. And of course, if you want a more in-depth breakdown of these, there's a video available. Of course, if you listen, there's an episode available. But the first thing I want to talk about is the 49ers run game versus the Saints run defense. So the 49ers run game right now got a modest 119 yards in their first matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. And I say modest because this is a team that normally with Christian McCaffrey in the backfield average over 140 yards on the ground. Now, last year without McCaffrey for most part of the season, it ended at around 129 yards per game on the ground. So as you could see, last week's run game wasn't as successful as it should be. They averaged 3.3 yards per carry against the Seattle Seahawks. Christian McCaffrey had 69 yards on the ground. Now, he added a bunch more as far as a receiver, but the run game never really got to the point where it was hammering the opposing defense the way we've seen Kyle Shanahan's offense work before. So 49ers run game needs to be more successful. Some of it has to do with the blocking up front, with the offensive line, with the tight ends. I think that they need to be a little bit better than they were last week, and it's across the board. I also think that last week the 49ers came in with a couple exotic looks when it came to the run game, pulling Ben Barch on a play side run, and that didn't really work. You had some aggressiveness from the defensive line, a hyper-athletic defensive line from Seattle, and it gave some problems. So I expect a different plan. Part of the reason you're going against a different defense, the defensive line for the New Orleans Saints is not as athletic as the Seattle Seahawks, but just as physical. So you're getting a very physical defensive line that is got 2 guys on the edge that are very good with Granderson and Cam Jordan, and you've got guys in the middle that can absolutely stop you dead in your tracks and not allow any movement. So moving these guys laterally is going to be one of the names of the game. The New Orleans Saints gave up over 140 yards last week on the ground against Arizona. Now, of course, some of that can be attributed to Kyler Murray and his scrambling. That always happens. Kyler Murray inflates the rush yards. But there is still an opportunity to run the ball against the Saints, especially if you can attack the outside edges. If you can get some movement on Granderson or Cam Jordan or even hook them and get to the outside, with the way that Brandon Staley runs his defensive scheme with not very many second-level players in the box, right? If you're running a 6-man or 6-1, for instance, you only have 1 linebacker in the box, which means the closest guy to make a tackle after you get past the first level is a safety coming from deep. So expect the 49ers to try to attack the outside with Christian McCaffrey and Brian Robinson and see if they can get these guys moving laterally down the line of scrimmage. And if it's not successful early in the run game, expect it to kind of be more successful late as they start wearing these guys down. It happened to Seattle last week. They slowly started wearing down, and the 49ers run game was more successful in quarter 3 and quarter 4. And I think that's what the 49ers can expect right now as this season progresses. But 49ers run game versus Saints run defense is going to be very important. And a lot of it's going to be Jake Brendel, Ben Barch, Dominic Pooney, and how they handle the interior part of that defensive line for the New Orleans Saints. Nathan Shepard, Brian Breesy, Devon Goshawk, like those guys, handling them, even a Jonathan Bullard. That's going to be, can we get those guys moving? And I think that's going to be part of the 49ers scheme. Horizontal offense is going to be one of the things easy for the 49ers this week, is spreading them horizontally. It is a key to kind of create some open lanes, not just in the run game, but in the passing game. But I'm focusing on the run right now. The other matchup that I'm really looking forward to when it comes to D-line and offensive line is Carl Granderson and Cam Jordan versus Trent Williams and Colt McKivitz. And if this is Spencer Burford in place of Trent Williams, it becomes even more complicated. But Granderson and Cam Jordan are very talented edge rushers. Granderson, more of the speed guy. He's got the ability to, turn the corner, flatten out, and get to your quarterback. And the reason it's so important is I talked about these defensive linemen being so physical on the interior. They are built to get an interior push, to walk guys back to the quarterback. Your interior offensive line, minus Dominic Pooney, is not built for that. Ben Barch and Jake Brendel are not set for traditional pass sets where they have to anchor and hold off big physical defensive linemen. So this is a case where it really is in the 49ers' favor if they can get a run game going with outside zone and then play action off of that, where they can move the pocket a little bit for Mac Jones, not have him have to set up in a traditional pocket. He is a pocket quarterback, but slight half rolls, things like that can be very successful for him in this offense. It also simplifies reads with level concepts in what could be flood plays, right? So you get, the guy who's short coming out, the intermediate route, and then the deep route. That is a levels concept, and a flood, the zone. Those are easy looks, but it also takes the pressure off the interior part of the offensive line who have to block in traditional pass sets where they have to anchor. Now they're moving. Now you get those big defensive line moving laterally. So it kind of eliminates a little bit of that interior push, because the problem the 49ers could face is if they're in a traditional pass look and Mac Jones is back there and you get a good pass rush from the edge rushers on the outside. And those guys make Colt McKivitz and Trent Williams, they get up to the field on him, and Mac Jones has to step up. He has to have room to step up in that pocket. He's not a scrambler. He's not a guy that's going to extend plays. So that interior push can't be there. So it's going to be important for Williams and McKivitz especially to prevent that. So that way Mac Jones can kind of move left or move right and make it so he doesn't always have to step up and that pocket collapse on him. So it's going to be a very complementary style for those guys. But handling Granderson and handling Cam Jordan is going to be key. 49ers tight ends and receivers versus Saints safeties. I think if you were going to look at a position, you see the weakness with the Saints safeties. Now, not so much Reed. Reed is really good. But when you look at the counterpart, Jordan Howden or Jonas Sanker, you have an opportunity if you can get some matchups against them. And why I said receivers is I think there's an opportunity for guys like MVS, even Ricky Pearsall, to get on Jordan Howden and maybe get vertical in some of these, quarters looks and really press them down the seam. When you have two high safeties, you can run a player down the seam. And so I think there's opportunities for that. I think there's also opportunities for Jake Tunges to do the exact same thing. So that's something that I'm going to be keeping my eye on in this matchup, is the 49ers tight ends and receivers against that two high safety look. Can we get somebody vertical down the field? And the 49ers can. The 49ers get somebody vertical down the field and, take advantage of those safeties. I think that's going to be one of the keys to this football game. Now let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball, where it has to start on slowing Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is one of the most talented running backs we've seen in the NFL, over the last several years. The dual threat ability that he has, he can run the outside zone. He's got the toss plays. He can run inside. He's got more power than you think, but also can catch the ball in the backfield. But the reason that this one's going to be fun, and this is kind of strength on strength, is Fred Warner and D. Winters are two of the best linebackers covering pass catching running backs in the entire league. D. Winters had one of the best PFF grades in coverage last week in the entire league. Fred Warner is probably the best linebacker in the NFL in coverage, and maybe he will end up being the best ever in coverage in the NFL when it comes to playing linebacker. That's how good he's been. So Alvin Kamara, 49ers want to stop the run first, right? This is the whole blueprint of this defense. They've built this defense now to earn the right to rush the passer on third down. So stopping Alvin Kamara early is going to be important. Now, Alvin Kamara is not coming alone. He's got other talented running backs as well. So it's not just stopping Alvin Kamara, but it's also stopping Keandre Miller, who had a big run last week against the Arizona Cardinals. But for the most part, if you can slow down Alvin Kamara, you can slow down the New Orleans Saints run game. Now, how much are the New Orleans Saints going to put into this run game? That is to be determined. Last week, they kind of gave up on it. Kamara had a big run for a touchdown. They kind of went away from it and went to a lot of passes. Spencer Rattler threw the ball 46 times. I don't think Kellen Moore thinks that's a sustainable way to win. He needs to find more balance. He wants to be more balanced like the 49ers offense was last week. 36 runs, 35 passes. That's extreme balance for an offense. It, was capped off by a win. It wasn't like how the 49ers wanted, right? You had 24 first downs, but you only scored 17 points. So there was something missing there, but they want more balance. And D. Winters and Fred Warner have to stop the run. They have to slow it down. Of course, Luke Gifford's going to help in that when the Saints put the 49ers in their base 4-3. But I expect to see a lot of nickel, Upton Stout out there having to help in the run game. So it's going to be on D. Winters, and can he stick with Alvin Kamara? I think it's going to be a fun matchup. The 49ers NASCAR defensive line versus Saints O-line. I talked about some of the injuries for the Saints, right? You got Talise Fuaga, who's probably going to play, but he's dealing with the injury. That could be a real hamper for him. And, of course, on the other side, you've got rookie Kelvin Banks. So you've got two offensive tackles, one nicked up, still younger, but Talise Fuaga has proven to be a good offensive tackle. And Kelvin Banks, who's a high pick. And the truth is, if the Saints would have drafted Mikael Williams, the likelihood is the 49ers would have drafted Kelvin Banks with pick number 11. And it went the other way. They drafted Kelvin Banks, the 49ers drafted Mikael Williams. So this is going to be an extreme matchup when the 49ers go to their NASCAR package. You've got Bryce Huff, Nick Bosa, Yetur Gross-Matos, who's no longer on the injury list at all for this week, no injury designation, and Mikael Williams. And those guys are going to rush from the inside. And those guys are going to be going against a backup in Dylan Radins, who's, pretty talented along this offensive line, still pretty good. Cesar Ruiz, who's really, really good. I think he's very talented. And Eric McCoy. No Trevor Penning. So Dylan Radins will be the backup playing on the left side next to Kelvin Banks. So that pass rush needs to take advantage of that Saints offensive line. Fuaga, a little hobbled. Kelvin Banks, a little young. Dylan Radins, talented, but not Trevor Penning. Can you get some interior pass rush? I think this is a game that Mikael Williams and Yetur Gross-Matos can do some damage, but Bryce Huff and Nick Bosa really have some opportunities. I think those guys are going to have opportunities with that NASCAR defense, and they need to take advantage of getting off the field on third down. You earn the right on third down, you got to do it. Then Robert Saleh versus Spencer Rattler. He's got to confuse Rattler in his pre to post snap reads. Like Kellen Moore said in his presser, Robert Saleh is really good about showing man and then sprinkling in zone and getting you confused post snap. You'll even see it. Teams use motion to get guys moving so that way they can detect if it's zone or man, and they'll move and then still be in zone coverage, and it kind of throws guys off when it comes to their pre to post snap. And when you start getting guys confused in what coverage you're in from pre to post snap, that makes them hold on to the football, not trust their first read, and that leaves opportunities to get in the backfield and get sacks against Spencer Rattler. So I think Robert Saleh's ability to kind of change up coverage and also be very deliberate with how he goes about bringing blitzes, I think it's an opportunity to get after Rattler early and often. Arizona only able to get to Spencer Rattler one time. I think the 49ers are looking at an opportunity to get even more with a good game plan to attack Spencer Rattler. The next one is going to be Juwan Johnson versus the 49ers linebackers and safeties. Linebackers got to worry about Alvin Kamara. They also have to help on Juwan Johnson. The reason I think this one's interesting is you got Marquis Siegel and Jason Pennick, who are dime slash safeties, right? These guys have played nickel and dime corner in their career or in college. And now they're going to go against a really good tight end in Juwan Johnson. He was very successful last week against Arizona. And I think the 49ers need to slow him down if they are going to be successful. Extremely talented, big individual. He's a matchup problem for Upton Stout if you try to cover him with your nickel corner. Johnson's going to have a lot of height and a lot of size on Stout. Marquis Siegel and Jason Pennick are, bigger, more physical. I think that's the matchup the 49ers want, but those are also some tough matchups. Marquis Siegel was up to the challenge last week. We've got a more talented tight end for him to deal with this week. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see how they do it. Now, keys to win this week is something that I love to bring up because these are the things that if you win on, you usually win football games. Last week, the 49ers did win in these categories, and guess what? They won in the game. Third and long is a must. You must force third and longs against Spencer Rattler and the New Orleans Saints offense. They've got talented players. They've got Chris Olave. They've got Brandon Cooks. They got Rashid Shaheed, who's got a ton of speed. Speed is not a problem for the New Orleans Saints playmakers. And I just talked about Juwan Johnson at tight end and Alvin Kamara at running back. They're talented when it comes to offensive playmakers. So getting them to third and long by stopping the run and earning the right to rush the passer, getting that NASCAR defense out there is going to be extremely important for the 49ers. Last week, the San Francisco 49ers offense was good on third down. They converted at a 50% rate, 7 of 14, phenomenal. For the Saints, they only were 35%. That is not a successful way to go about offense. So 49ers want to keep them 35% or below on third down. That's how you get off the field, give your offense more opportunities, win the time of possession, and shorten the game. I mean, one of the easiest ways to prevent playmakers from beating you is prevent them from getting on the field by getting off quickly when you have the opportunity. Now, on the flip side, 49ers defense only gave up third down conversions at 30% rate. That is an elite caliber. I say this every time I do my Tell the Tape videos. 30% and lower is elite level. Now, can the 49ers sustain this is going to be the bigger question, but that is the hope. That you can kind of stay in that range, that you can keep them from converting on third down, and one of the best ways to do it is force third and long. Third and 2, third and 3, third and manageable. That was the problem for Nick Sorensen's defense. That's why they gave up so many third downs. With Robert Saleh last week, it was 3rd and 6 to 3rd and 8 and beyond. That is a big reason why. Now, for the Saints defense and Brandon Staley, they weren't terrible on third down, but they weren't good either. 46%. I say this all the time. To be an average defense, you need to be around 40%. To be a bad defense, it's kind of this range. And to be a terrible defense, you're over 50% allowed on third down. So Saints weren't good last week. That's part of the reason the Cardinals won. Cardinals were able to convert on third down, even some third and longs. Those are backbreaking for a defense, but 49ers need to stay ahead of the sticks. That means, you want 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 at most, so that way you can have convertible third downs. Also, that would take the pressure off Mac Jones when you can take what the defense gives you and just throw the ball for a short pass and not have to worry about pressing it down the field to an intermediate route. You can kind of just take a little short one, give what the defense is giving you, get a first down conversion, but you can only do that if you are sitting in a position where it's 3rd and 3 or less. So 49ers have a real advantage in third down offense and third down defense. Now, in the red zone, the 49ers offense wasn't great last week. Now, they had an opportunity to do a lot better. They were 2 of 5 in the red zone. They went 40%. They were a fingertip away from being way higher than that, about going 3 for 5. If Brock Purdy could have got a little bit more on that ball or threw it a little bit quicker to Ricky Pearsall and not allowed Tariq Woolen, who is super long and super athletic, to knock that ball away. So the 49ers need to be better in the red zone. Last year, they were about 58% in the red zone. The year before that, in 2023, they were 68% scoring touchdowns in the red zone, which was number 1 in the NFL. Christian McCaffrey, part of that is real, but now they're going to be without Brock Purdy. So they need to get this red zone conversion rate around 50% for this game to have a real chance to beat the New Orleans Saints on the road in the Superdome. So this is going to be interesting. The Saints were really bad in the red zone last week. They only scored touchdowns at 25% rate, and that's part of the reason they couldn't get it done in the last part of the game. They had a chance to tie the game up at the end of the game, and Juwan Johnson almost made a tremendous catch. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Spencer Rattler's last throw goes out of the end zone, intended for Olave, but that's where the 49ers want to keep them, is under 30% in the red zone. That'll give you your best opportunities. Make teams that get in the red zone kick field goals and not score touchdowns, and that's how you win games. Red zone defense, 49ers defense at 33%, which is really good. That's stingy defense. The 49ers got some big stops last week against Seattle Seahawks, forced field goals, and that's ultimately how you walk away with the win. Now, Brandon Staley's defense, they gave up touchdowns at 66% last week against the Arizona Cardinals. That's really close to what the 49ers defense was last year when he was a consultant for that defense or a defensive assistant. They gave up 68% last year. So Brandon Staley's woes in the red zone happen. Part of the reason they happen, he likes to run a lot of man coverage. Teams know that. They come out in bunch and stack sets. They run a lot of mesh concepts over the middle, and they create some opportunities for rub routes against that coverage. That's part of the reason that you've seen touchdowns last week from the Arizona Cardinals, to some of their big-time players. Marvin Harrison Jr. got a big one right across the middle. Boom. Big reason was they ran a mesh route concept over the middle. And, of course, you want to win the time of possession. Last week, the 49ers won big against the Seattle Seahawks by over 10-plus minutes. That's one way to do it. Now, when you look at turnovers, it's always one of the keys to limit turnovers. Now, I got to give the Saints credit. They didn't turn over the ball last week. No giveaways, no takeaways. Their turnover differential is 0. So that was a good job by them. 49ers, they created 2 turnovers. Sam Okuwanu generated a fumble that was recovered by Marquise Siegel. That was really huge. And then, of course, you had Nick Bosa closing out the game by pushing Abe Lucas back into Sam Darnold and causing a fumble that he recovered himself. The problem was Brock Purdy also threw 2 interceptions in the game. One of them, understandable. The other one, pretty egregious. And so Mac Jones is going to have to take care of the football. 49ers can't lose the turnover battle and expect to beat the New Orleans Saints on the road. You have to at least stay even in this category. So taking care of the football is going to be huge. And for the 49ers, forcing Spencer Rattler to make a mistake is going to be huge as well. Something that the 49ers definitely need to do. Now, we're going to get into the Wow That's Bold predictions. These are brought to you by 49erscutbackshop.com. You can go in the description section, get the link to go over and see the merch. Merch available over there. I'm going to be dropping new merch over the next several weeks, but you can go check that out. Wow That's Bold is up next.
Wow, that's really bold. Whoa. Whoa. Whoa.
It's got to be really bold. It's got to be whoa. And for the 49ers offense, I have 2 predictions. I think Brian Robinson's going to get a touchdown in this game. I think that he's going to have an opportunity in the red zone, and he's going to capitalize and power in for a big-time touchdown for the Niners, which they're ultimately going to need. And I think Mac Jones is going to throw for a touchdown. I don't think it's going to be a huge Mac Jones game. I don't see him throwing for over 200 yards, but I do see him getting a touchdown. And I think it's going to be a touchdown to Ricky Pearsall. I think the way I watched Ricky last week, he had opportunity for a couple of touchdowns. Either didn't get the ball thrown to him. The Jake Tunges one, he's open, doesn't get the ball thrown to him. Tunges makes a great play. Got to give him credit for that. But also the one that Tariq Woolen knocked away. He ran a great route, was wide open. It should have been a touchdown. It wasn't. But I think Mac Jones is going to find Ricky Pearsall in the end zone for a touchdown. Those are my 2 Wow That's Bold offensive predictions this week. My 2 defensive Wow That's Bold predictions this week is Marquise Siegel is going to have an interception. I just think that there's going to be an opportunity for the 49ers to pressure Spencer Rattler, and he's going to float a ball, and Siegel's going to be there to make the play. I think he's a playmaker. I think we saw a little bit of it last week, and I think it's going to continue this week. I think he's got the ball hawk mentality, the way he flies around. And then I think Bryce Huff is going to have 2 sacks. People asking about Bryce Huff last week, it was close. He had some free shots at the quarterback, and he didn't quite get there in time. Darnold able to get rid of the ball, but he influenced some bad passes, made some things happen. And I think this week, when you look at the tackles for the New Orleans Saints, you've got the rookie Kelvin Banks, you've got, Talise Fuaga kind of nursing an injury. I think that there's going to be some third and long situations where the 49ers can bring in that NASCAR package. And I think there's going to be more attention to Bosa this week. I think the Robert Saleh is going to create some opportunities, both with stunts and getting situations where Bryce Huff is singled up. And I think he's going to come through in this game and have 2 sacks. Now it's time to talk about my score prediction. This is brought to you by FanDuel, of course, the title sponsor of 49ers Cutback. And, I'm taking the 49ers in this game to cover. I got the 49ers winning this game, and I think they're going to win by more than 3 points, and that's the line right now, 49ers by 3. I think the 49ers are going to win this game 20-16 in a very defensive, late in battle. I talked about the 2 touchdowns earlier. I think you're going to get a couple of field goals as well from Eddie Pinheiro, and I think the 49ers are they're going to win a tough game on the road, 20-16, just cover the score. But also, I would be betting under the 40.5 total points, as I have 36 total points in this game. So, betting on the 49ers to cover, betting on the under 40.5, and I think the 49ers get the win 20-16. And I get it. Some people have been saying they don't even see this game, reaching 30 points or anyone scoring 20. That's definitely a possibility, but I think there's an opportunity for the run game to get going for the 49ers, and I think that they're going to find opportunities to score a couple of touchdowns in this game, and I think it's going to be extremely pivotal, and they're going to get their second road win of the season, and they need it because next week, divisional rival Arizona Cardinals will be waiting for them. So let me know your score predictions down in the comment section. Let me know your wow, that's bold predictions down in the comment section. I always enjoy reading those. And of course, I'm very appreciative of everyone that comes by, likes the video, comments on the video, watches the video, shares the video. You guys truly are the best. You have really been helping the channel a lot, and I extremely appreciate it. So thank you guys so much. It's really a fun time for the 49ers, and I appreciate everyone coming through. What a great community the 49ers have, and I appreciate all of you. Now, if you're listening audio platform, thank you so much. If you want to give a 5-star rating, I really appreciate that. Of course, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.